Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be going over the top 3 builds for solo PvP. Now this list is meant to be for open world solo PvP, not things like corrupted dungeons which have their own little niche meta because of the environment, so they might not necessarily be the best 1v1 builds, but they're more intended for taking on multiple enemies at the same time. Starting off at number 3, we have the Great Nature. This build has been nerfed a lot. The Great Nature staff has been nerfed quite significantly in its solo potential over the past year or so, as it was one of the most dominant solo weapons for a very long time. However, it still has quite a bit of potential. So this current build was popularized by the nature god himself, Onesimee. All clips are credit to him that you're seeing in the background here because me and healing staffs just don't go together very well. So if you're interested in his content, make sure that you check him out. His links will be in the description. So for the build, obviously your weapon is the Great Nature Staff. For your helmet, you want to run Hunter Hood. For your chest piece, you want to run Cleric Robe. Cape is almost always going to be your Thetford Cape. And boots, you're pretty much going to run any escape boots. So Soldier Boots, Demon Boots, or Gathering Boots. For your food, you want to run Avalonian Omelets or just normal omelets, and potions are either poisons or resistance potions. There are also some slightly different versions of this build that specialize more in 1v1s and 1v2s, where you can switch to things like Mage Cowl, Fiend Cowl, Mercenary Jacket, and Bridgewatch Cape. So for the pros of this build, obviously it's a healing staff, so it has pretty insane self-sustain, which is really important in solo PvP a lot of the time. As you sort of kite enemies, you can get a lot of your health back. It's also great against a lot of enemies. If you're severely outnumbered, it's actually pretty good because with your E, every time you get hit, you get health back, which means if there's a ton of people hitting you, if you have that E active, you're going to be practically invincible. It also uses a lot of reflex, which means that enemies essentially are going to be hitting themselves and killing themselves, which is really good in these sort of like 1vx scenarios because you're kind of relying on and hoping that the enemies are maybe a little bit less skilled, but more importantly that they're not going to play very safely against you. If there's only one of you and you're in a healing staff, they're probably not going to think that they're going to lose, so they might play a little bit more carelessly and not really pay attention to their reflex and just kill themselves on their reflex. This is a lot of the time how you get your kills with the Great Nature build. The reason that this build comes in at number 3, however, is that it has some pretty severe cons to it. For starters, it is very weak against healers, as you overall have very low damage output. It's almost impossible to kill someone when they have a healer backing them up, just because it's very, very unlikely that you'll be able to outdamage that healer's healing output unless they really suicide on your reflex. The second big weakness of this Great Nature build is that it's really weak to purges. You have a lot of things that you really want to get the full duration of and the full value of, and purges can completely shut you down. Coming in at number 2, we have the classic Deathgivers. These are very similar to the Nature Staff in that they were very traditionally the go-to solo PvP weapon. However, they have relatively consistently been nerfed over the past little while, which no longer makes them super dominant. That being said, again, similar to the Nature Staff, they're still very, very effective when it comes to solo PvP. So for the build, obviously your weapon is going to be Deathgivers, and for your chest piece, it's always going to be Assassin Jacket. This build really relies on the Assassin Jacket. It is super, super effective with it. This is because the Assassin Jacket gives you everything you need. It gives you time to buy to build up more of your stacks. It gives you a stacking damage for your end burst combo, and it allows you to stay safe and elusive in some of these longer fights. The rest of the build has some options for it. For your helmet, it's either the Stalker Hood or the Spectre Hood. Some people have been running Stalker Hood is the sort of classic one, makes your burst damage a lot higher. However, Spectre Hood is really important. As we were just talking about, the Assassin Jacket is so important, so resetting that can be really valuable. For Cape, there's a lot of Cape options. The top 3 that I've seen are Thetford, Fort Sterling, and Undead Capes. Obviously, Undead is just another stealth and a largely stealth-based build, which is good. They're very unlikely to have any reveals left by the time you get low health if you do end up getting low health. Fort Sterling just counters you getting locked down by CC when you're out of stealth, and Thetford's just good for more damage. For boots, again, there are 2 main options. More recently, people have been running escape boots, so Soldier, Demon, or Gathering Boots, so they can get away after they get the kill. However, the traditional method is to run Stalker Shoes, which gives you yet another stealth in your build and gives you higher burst damage. Typically, you run escape boots if your goal is to get a kill and then get out, and if you run stalker shoes, your goal is to essentially kill everyone, because once you go in with stalker shoes, there's no real getting out. For food, again, there's a couple options based on personal preference. Usually people use beef stew, however recently Avalonian omelets have been doing pretty well, and even normal omelets are also pretty good options. For potions, it's almost always poisons, although occasionally people can also use health potions. So looking at the pros of this build, the biggest pro of this build is that you're very, very elusive. You're incredibly hard to lock down. You have so many stealths, dashes, so many different things. It makes you really difficult to kill, and you can just slowly whittle people down before bursting them. It's also an incredibly high burst damage build once you get set up, so you can really get some kills on some unsuspecting players that aren't really used to the amount of damage that Deathgivers can put out. And lastly, it's also a very, very high skill cap weapon, which I put as a pro because it makes it very, very fun and rewarding. Usually the types of people that like to do these sort of 1vx styles are people that want to sort of show off and really master something and get really good at the game, and so having a really high skill cap weapon and build fits into that playstyle. For the cons, similar to the Great Nature, it's pretty weak versus healers. Pretty much the way Deathgivers work is that they have a damage threshold of burst damage that they can do to finish somebody off with their full combo using all of their abilities, and so if they have a healer that's just constantly healing the people that you're poking down, they can constantly keep them above that threshold. Another large weakness of Deathgivers is that they're very weak to reveals, especially multiple reveals. They have so many stealths, but they really rely on these stealths to be elusive, and even one reveal can really shut down that elusiveness and allow them to just sit on you and kill you before you can get any of your important abilities off. Before we move on to number 1, we're going to look at an honorable mention, which is the one-handed spear. The one-handed spear used to be very, very solid for these 1vx styles, but inner focus got nerfed really heavily and it's fallen out ever since. However, it's recently had a little bit of a resurgence in a slightly different style. This style is more similar to actually the Great Nature, where it relies on sort of double reflex and a little bit of self-sustain. So if your weapon, you're obviously going to run the one-handed spear. Offhand, torch is okay, although Ava shield is also really good. Your helmet is Hunter Hood. Chest piece is Mercenary Jacket if you want sustain, although some people also run Cleric Robe. Boots, you really want Soldier Boots because you don't just want Escape, but you also want Chase with this build. For food, there's a lot of options. Roasts are good, the new life-stealing food. Avalonian omelets are good, and sometimes stews can also work very well. For potions, it's almost always going to be healing potions. Now, the reason that this isn't a top 3 build is because it requires a little bit higher IP to be effective, and it has quite a high skill floor. Essentially, you need to be pretty skilled at the game and at the spear build specifically to be able to use it effectively. If you don't have good spacing or use your resources ineffectively, you're just going to die 99% of the time. However, if you want to see someone that plays this build really well, check out NomadPoncho, or more notably known as Stabber, who has been playing this build I think pretty recently, or at least a very similar build to this. So make sure you check him out. I'll put his links down in the description. He both streams and has YouTube content. The number 1 solo PvP build right now is not actually a specific build, but more of a build archetype. And it is the high single target burst builds. These types of builds are 100% the meta for solo PvP right now. Pretty much anyone you see doing solo PvP is probably going to have some version of a super high burst damage build where they kill one person and then they just get out of there. Now, interesting, the core of this build is actually not in the weapon, but in the rest of the build. So for helmet, it's almost always going to be Mage Cowl. Your chest piece is almost always Cleric Robe. Your boots are always going to be Escape Boots. Offhand, if your build allows for an offhand, is going to be a Crypt Candle or Muizak. Cape is going to be Thetford Cape or Demon Cape very rarely. For potions, it is always going to be Poison Potions, and for food, it is always going to be Beef Stews. For your weapon, pretty much you want to choose anything that has really high single target damage burst. Two of the best options for weapons right now are the Bloodletter and the One-Handed Curse. The Bloodletter build, the current archetype, I think was popularized by FlaccidBaron. He uses it a lot, and if you want to check out some of his videos, he absolutely destroys people with this build and uses all sorts of fun little baits to do so. The One-Handed Curse version of this build was popularized by SirRusty in his Taking Over Afghanistan by himself videos. So if you want to see that build in action, make sure you check out his videos. As always, both of their links will be in the description. What's so great about this build though is that so many other weapons actually do amazingly with this build as well. I've been testing a lot of them over the past week, and I'm sure I missed one, but I've had success with the normal bow, the whispering bow, the spirit hunter, the pike, claymore, carving sword, light crossbow, black hands, claws, and the one-handed fire. So for the pros of this build, the biggest pro is that you can kill one person very easily and then just get out. That's what the build is designed to do. You drop all of your cooldowns on one person at the same time, and they're pretty much guaranteed to die unless they have a defensive up that they use at the correct timing, and then with your escape boots it's pretty easy to get out after it. Another pro is that it's very easy to pull off. There's a lot less thinking and outplaying involved than the other two builds with the Deathgivers and Great Nature. You kind of just throw all your stuff on one person and they die. Another really good pro of this build is that if you can bait people at all, even getting 1 to 2 seconds of advantage where you have your abilities and they don't is super impactful with this build compared to other builds, because it's pretty much only countered by defensives, and if they don't have access to that because of that global cooldown, you're pretty much guaranteed to win the fight. So using low HP to bait, using the Christmas bait that I introduced in my last video, mount baits, bubble baits, tons of different kind of baits, you can get really easy kills with this build. Now, as always, this build does have a little bit of cons, a little bit of counters, mainly any immunities, so things like Cleric Robe and Cleric Cowl. If they use these at the right time, you pretty much have no way of killing them anymore. And also things like Purges and Hard CC, if they use them at the right time, they can stop you from escaping or even stop you from killing them. That's it for this video, guys. I really hope you enjoyed, and I really hope one of these solo builds works for you and you can have a lot of fun with it. Now, it's really important that you subscribe because I have a video coming out very soon, a video series actually that I've put a lot of work into, and that is a really good series in my opinion at least, so you're really not going to want to miss that one. Make sure you subscribe, maybe even turn on the bell notifications so you don't miss episode 1 of that.